Hello, everybody. Well, you can do better than that. Hello, everybody. Oh, that's much better. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for coming to Community Miracle Center. We're always very glad that people come, that you're here, so thank you. The woman over here on my right, Mari Perron, I'm sure most of you are aware of her, know her. I am beginning to get to know her better. We all went out to dinner last night in North Beach, had a grand old time. We showed her a little bit of the big city. She's not really a big city girl, but we had a real big city North Beach experience, so that was great. I found out that Mari's from St. Paul, Minnesota, and that she has lived there her entire life. I don't know many people who lived at the same place for their entire life, but she has lived there she's lived there her entire life. She tells me that she first started receiving Course of Love in 1998, and that it was first published in a form in the year 2001. I don't know when I first became aware of A Course of Love, but I know that it was through Earl Purdy. That suddenly Earl Purdy was teaching this thing called A Course of Love. And I've known Earl for, decades and have a great deal of respect for Earl. And if Earl has embraced something and is teaching something, there must be something to it. There's something in it that is interesting him. And so, it registered in my mind. But I'm a busy man, and I don't get to explore too many things unless they kind of hit me over the head. So, a couple of years ago, this man named Glenn called me up, and he said that, Course of Love was now being published in a new, really great book form, and that it was the combination of all the works, and he knew that Course in Miracles students everywhere were embracing this, and they were going to love this, and that it was being thought of as, the next step from A Course in Miracles. Now, it's kind of a bold statement, so he said he just wanted to send me one, and he was sure that after I saw it, we would want to carry it, and he was pretty aggressive about the whole thing. So, and he did, he sent me one, and, I looked at it, and of course I knew it from Earl, and I just got that, that hit, that energy that this is a good thing, and we should carry it, and I should look at it, and I did, and I liked what I saw, and I liked what I read. Now, I haven't read a lot of it, so I'm certainly not an expert on A Course of Love. I wouldn't begin to think I would teach it at this point, or even say all that much about it. But a little bit what I say is that I've often thought that with A Course in Miracles, one of the problems with it is that people get way too intellectual about it. They try to really figure it out. There have been many, many teachers, I won't mention any names, who like to diagram it, and this goes here, that's over there, they combine over here, they spread out over there, and that somehow if you could learn the whole structure and put it in a nice rigid form, that somehow you would know A Course in Miracles. And I've always resisted that idea. I never thought that was really the way A Course in Miracles should be experienced. And what I liked about A Course of Love is that it definitely didn't lend itself to that. In fact, it was really something else. It was something that you just read and allowed it to wash over you and allow the energy to just change you and move you and heal you in a way that you didn't have to be intellectual about. In a way that was a real heart-centered way and a real love-centered way. And I like that. I just really like that. And I am looking forward to reading more of it and getting to know more of it. And as I've gotten to know Mari, she is also the embodiment of that, just kind of a peaceful, loving, sweet energy that you just allow to wash over you and embrace you. So we're really glad that she's here. I'm really glad she accepted our invitation to come here. So I think that's enough of an introduction. So let's give a nice round of applause for Mari Perron.
I'm glad I've got that on video. That was really good. Light's kind of in my eyes there. Hello, everyone.
You sort of need to be at the podium or we won't get you in the video.
Oh, okay.
Just don't look at the lights.
Okay.
Look straight ahead here. Don't look at the lights.
Oh.
We need the light for the video.
When I was in Vegas, so this is just about a week past the Course in Miracles conference there, and during my first presentation, which was in the big room, it wasn't one of the keynote speakers, but it was in the big room, and there were a good number of people there. About halfway through, and it was at 8:30 on a Friday night, 8:30. And about halfway through, these alarms started going off, this flood alarm, and these lights were flashing, and I'd been looking out at this audience, and they looked so bored out of their minds. I said, do you guys want me to just take this as a sign, and we'll just, I'll just stop my talk, and we'll just, carry on with something else? And they were like, no, this is great. And I realized later, 7 o'clock, they had dinner, and they'd been at it all day, and they were tired, and they were just, but as I was talking, I was thinking, oh man, I'm off the mark or something here, because, so that reminds me of that a little bit. I have to admit something. Well, actually, first I should say my thank yous, because I think it is really awesome that the Community Miracles Center has embraced A Course of Love. It's been a long time coming, and I am certain, because of what Jesus says in this, that he intended for A Course of Love to be something that A Course in Miracles students would find. And if they don't want it, I mean, if I hadn't received it, I think to myself, because I love Course in Miracles, and I thought, if I hadn't received this, I'm not sure that I would, somebody would probably have had to convince me, to read it. So I completely understand that, but I can't tell you how it feels to my heart that this is finally happening, because I feel it's meant to happen. I believe it's what Jesus intended to happen. And I believe it's almost like a uniting of mind and heart, which is, Course of Love is all about that, this uniting of mind and heart into wholeheartedness. And that kind of happens then with A Course in Miracles and A Course of Love too, when these are both accepted. And so Tony, being one of the early people to accept A Course of Love, I'm very appreciative. And many of his reverends have been, like Judy and others have been having Course of Love classes and included me a little bit, and I just think it's wonderful. So thank you. Thank everybody here very much. But I will make an admission. I'm kind of a nervous public speaker because I haven't done a lot of this yet. And Hi, Rudy. I slept in your bed last night.
Oh, you did? Let them know. I thought we'd loosen it up a little bit.
Well, that's what he did in the first, so this is my first time at A Course in Miracles conference as a presenter, and everybody goes around and says who they are and what they're about, and I did that. And then the last person to talk was Rudy, and he said, and I love Course of Love, and Mari's sleeping in my bed. But it was great. I mean, that really is great. It loosens it up. And I like that about everyone I've met here, too. And Tony particularly. It's like this is a loosened up place. People are not trying to live by a certain prescription of what it ought to look like to be spiritual. And that's what I've found in many, many places. And it kind of turned me off. And it's like, wow, this is, I didn't know. You know, it's like you don't know until you get the experience. So I didn't know that this existed. and that there was so much diversity here, and it's accepted so much, you know, everybody's different lives. And I really kind of, you know, in that way you do when you don't know a lot, I thought, boy, this is all Course of Love stuff, you know, being who you are and accepting our differences. And I found out we have some Course in Miracles people living this really well here. So, thank you. And then for the admissions part, so I'm a nervous speaker, and I'm going to Vegas. And for a while, it looked like I was going to be one of the keynotes. And so for me, I live this very quiet life. I'm kind of a contemplative, and I'm a writer, and the thought of going to Vegas and, you know, giving a talk to hundreds of people was kind of freaking me out. And so when this coming here got arranged, what I was thinking in my mind was that after Vegas, I'd come up the coast, and because there are a lot of Course of Love groups here, and I haven't really met that many, and I wanted to meet people, and so what I was thinking was I would just go talk to people, you know, kind of casually, meet the groups, or if I had to do a talk, I would just do a version of the one I did in Vegas. And Troy says, oh no, can't do that. Too many of my people are going to have been in Vegas, and you need to come up with a new topic. And I'm like,
Oh.
so this is just, you know, weeks before I'm going to Vegas, and I've got like my mind full of this talk that I have to give, and I'm really a one thing at a time person anyway, just kind of get immersed, and then I get done with that, and then I go to the next. So, and what I think is so amusing now is that I have no idea how I came up with this topic. I can't look back and see one bit of the thought process. You know, it's like if you come up with a topic for a talk, you would think you could remember. And I have like no memory of it. I think just because I was in a little bit of a state, you know. It's like, he needs this topic. But I like the topic. It's like, and I didn't get a chance to do a lot of preparations because I couldn't do it before Vegas. And since Vegas, I've been traveling. And so when I finally began to kind of look at it, okay, what am I going to talk about? It was like, oh, I like this topic. So at least there's that. You know, at least I didn't go, oh, I don't really want to talk about that. So I'm going to read you what I gave as a topic, which maybe it didn't even matter to you, as you know, like I said, it just kind of ran through me. But the opening of it is, what is your heart's desire? And that's a question that's dear to my heart. And then I went on to suggest, in a treatise on the personal self, Jesus says that while your recognition of yourself has come a long way through your learning of this course, yourself, your small s self, is still seen as a stumbling block. What are these stumbling blocks? How do we move through them to, as Jesus says in the dialogues, fan the flames of our desire to be and to express who we are in truth? So that's kind of the main deal about it. We'll follow the movement of A Course of Love in this direction. So there's really three parts: the heart's desires, and then the stumbling blocks to their fulfillment, and then the role of longing and desire. So what I'm going to start with is where Jesus talks about our heart's desires. This is from chapter 3 of A Course of Love. And this, you say, this meant a lot to me. Our hearts go out to the world, to the suffering, to the weak of body and of mind. Our hearts are not so easily contained within the casing of our flesh and bone. Our hearts take wing with joy and break with sadness. Not so the brain that keeps on registering it all, a silent observer, soon to tell you that the feelings of your heart were foolishness indeed. It is to our hearts that we appeal for guidance, for there resides the one who truly guides. You who think this idea is rife with sentiment, sure to lead you to abandoning logic, and thereafter certainly to cause your ruin, I say to you again, take heart. Such foolishness as your heart's desires will save you now. Remember, it is your heart that yearns for home, Your heart that yearns for love, remember. Your heart that leads the way that, should you follow, will set you certainly on the path for home. Isn't that lovely?
Indeed.
Yeah.
And then I got inspired by Tony at the conference. I was really amazed at Tony's very real and very vulnerable sharing. And so I'm going to share just a little bit of my past as well. I say inspired by Tony. So I'm starting when I was 10. Starting when I was 10. But there's a reason I'm going to tell. There's two stories from my youth. One when I was 10. And when I was 10, I was moved to a new school. And I had grown up, my hair is kind of still red. When I was little, I had this orangey red hair, and it was ringlets. And people thought I looked like Shirley Temple. My mom would dress me like Shirley Temple. And I was the fourth child that went to this little Catholic school called St. Adalbert's. But we moved. And my sister graduated from 8th grade, and my mom said, you can't go across town by yourself. And she made me start this new school. And of course, by then I was 10. So I was used to being this sort of adored child in this church that my family had belonged to, and everybody knew me. And I went to this new school, and of course at 10, I wasn't as cute. I was gangly, and I was trying to get my hair to get straight so it would look like the other girl's hair. And I ended up with the nun called the Mean Nun, Sister Mary Roberts, who was mean, and she hated me. And so it was a very bad year, and I kept getting sick so that I could stay home from school. And finally, after taking me to the doctor many times, the doctor asked my mom to leave the room, and he talked to me, and then he called her back in, and he said, she's miserable at school. She's just about having a nervous breakdown. And I don't really remember how that concluded, but the one saving grace of that terribly bad year was that my essay was chosen as the best essay from the 5th grade. And because this nun hated me, I figured there was no reason she would have chosen it except that I was really good. And I decided from that moment that I was going to be a writer. And so it gave me something that, you know, from that bad year, I came out of it with something that was sustaining and that would really guide my life. And the second event I want to tell you about happened when I was 15. So 5 years later, and I'm at a Catholic high school now. And it's the end of sophomore year, and we went to have a retreat. And I'm in St. Paul, but they send us to Minneapolis to this big Franciscan, looks like a castle kind of place, and we're there for the weekend, and they kept us up late, and they had like these encounter kind of groups. And I was so shocked and amazed because I didn't know these kids really very well. And I thought most of them were really stuck up. And then we have these encounter things, and it's like everybody had the same feelings I did. And they had the same problems with their parents and the same poor self-images and all these things. And I was just, I was dumbfounded. And it's sort of like what I felt when I read A Course in Miracles. Because it's like Jesus was talking about how I think. It was like, well, everybody must think like this. I must not be the only one. You know, it's like you kind of feel like you're the only one until you find out you're not. So I had this great experience at this retreat, and I thought life was going to be different. And until I went to school Monday morning. And all the masks were back up. And I was brokenhearted. I really was brokenhearted. I thought, dang, I'm not coming back to this school. I made a vow to myself, I'm not coming back here. I've kind of wondered since then, what would have happened if I'd stayed? Because I didn't give it much of a chance. You know, I just thought, oh, I got their masks back up. I ain't sticking around. So I went to a public school, and it was an inner city public school, and it was a little wild, crazy, and I started getting a little wild and crazy too. And when I was 17, I was in my first quarter of college, and I met this hippie musician who played the most beautiful guitar. Oh my goodness. He could sing like the Moody Blues guys. And he could whistle too, and I've been trying to think, you probably know Rudy. I think it was Sean Phillips who did the whistling.
On Moody Blues?
No, not Moody Blues.
I don't
Different
know.
artist. Well, anyway, I think it was Sean Phillips. I was going to say Leanne Russell. I was like, no, it's not Leanne Russell. Anyway. And I got pregnant. And I had to get my parents' permission to get married. I got married at 17 and had my first child at 18. And when I was 23, I had 3 children and I was a single parent. And so my dreams got delayed. And my freedoms got delayed. And so I was joking at the, not really joking, in a way joking, at the Vegas conference that this period of coming out with the books is sort of like my going away to college experience. Like I'm new here in the world, and I'm going out with, in that wholehearted way that we're all called to go out to experience life newly. So this is part of that journey, and I'm really glad that you're part of it. It's like every person I meet lately, it's just, I'm just overwhelmed by the effect that A Course of Love is having on people, and their sincerity about that. And so I'm very pleased to be here. Now, after high school, I did have some good friendships, but these friendships were, you know, we talked about our boyfriends, we talked about our problems, and then in a little while we were talking about our husbands and our kids and this and that. And I yearned for something more, but I didn't know how to make it happen. And so it was almost 40 when I found the first relationships that really brought me to what I was looking for, which was sort of that ability to totally be myself and to know and be known with other people. And this ended up being like a prelude to A Course of Love. I was working at the University of Minnesota, and I met two women that I worked with there, got pregnant within days of each other. And the outcome of the pregnancies was very different. One had a baby girl who died. Her name was Grace. And Grace's mother, Mary Love, is my best friend, my soulmate, still to this day. The other woman, Julie, she had a little boy named Peter. And what began from this was such an intimate journey that became a spiritual journey. I'd been this Catholic all my life. Being a spiritual journey wasn't even on my radar. But because of this particular situation, Mary's great love for her baby Grace, and the tenderness with which we needed to treat one another, and the grief, it was like we all began to share our griefs. It's kind of like what Jesus talks about in the dialogues. We were becoming clear pools with each other. We became vulnerable. I never knew anybody in the way I came to know these women. And my heart desired that so much. And so I was still working with them in 1997 when I had this dream that told me you can no longer sell your mind for money. Your mind belongs to God. And because it said you can no longer sell your mind for money, I thought, this is like it's calling me to leave my job. I didn't want to leave my job. And I didn't know what God might want me to do. But eventually, I couldn't keep my mind on my job anymore. It was like a biblical affliction. It was like I couldn't perform. And so I finally did leave my job. And that was when my heart's desire was really awakened. Because to have a call and leave a job with friends you're on a spiritual journey with, and who you get to talk to every day, and to have to be called away for some work for God. And I think calls are like this. I think in our minds we can think when you're called, you know what you're called to do. But I think it's often not the case. That there is a period, I was talking to Tony about this on the way here, about, you feel called to move, maybe. You don't know why. You don't know why. You don't know what's ahead of you. So that was my period before A Course of Love, was this period of complete longing and desire for what this dream had talked about to show itself to me. And I didn't even know really where to seek, so I went to church and I talked to my priests. I didn't tell them I wanted to work for God, but it was like, you know, just kind of put it out there, and I ended up teaching CCD religion for a year, you know. But, you know, I really didn't know. And I always start by telling a little bit about these friends, because they opened my heart. You know, I've been hurt a lot. You know, you're a single parent. You've been hurt a lot, probably. Of course, we all have our wounds, and we all protect our hearts after a while. But my heart had been opened by this experience with my friends. But then it was Mary Love who brought me another dream that revealed that what my work was A Course of Love. And it was her birthday, November 25th, 1998. And she came over for coffee. And we did what we always did at work. You know, we would share our inner lives, our outer lives, and our dreams. This incredible way of revelation that has existed throughout time and that we disregard so much now. And she said, I had a dream about a new Course in Miracles. And she told me about what she saw. She didn't say, Mari, you're going to receive a new Course in Miracles, but she told me about this dream. And as she's telling me, it was like I'm going, oh, like it started to come together. All these clues that if I had even dared dream of such a huge work for God, I would have known. I would have known this was what was coming. There had been signs along the way. And so after she brought me that dream, it was only 5 days before I was ready to begin. And it only took me 5 days because I kept asking myself, who would want a new Course in Miracles? Now I knew that would probably not be something that would be welcome. But was I going to say no? No. It was so emotional, such a heart's joy to have what had been so long awaited actually come. To go to my desk and make myself ready and get my computer set up, open this new file, big computers then, big cursors that flashed on the screen, and this cursor pulsed, and I sat there. And I waited. But it wasn't very long at all. And I heard, this is A Course in Miracles. I heard this in my mind, so it was not audible. Very much like what Helen described as inner dictation, but I call it receiving. So that yearning was met. It's like this was the amazing thing, this whole long period. So it was July of 1997 when I had the dream, and then all this sort of confusion and leaving my job, and then another 8 months, and finally it was here. I had another period of great yearning and desire about 5 months later. By that time, I had received what would become the first 19 chapters of A Course of Love. And I had begun to completely trust the process, had total faith in it. Every day, Monday through Saturday, I would spend as much time as I could by myself receiving the Course. On Sundays, I would share. I had a little team that I shared it with. So this day, I go to my computer, expecting it to go as every day had gone for the last 5 months. And first, there was nothing. And then, I heard the first words that Jesus spoke to me personally. The first words I heard from Jesus were, "This is the Course in Miracles." Those were the first words. I didn't have any preamble of him talking to me, just beginning the Course. So my first words from Jesus were, "You can't go on with your thinking mind." And those 8 words were all I heard for the next couple of months. And I was absolutely devastated to think that I was doing something that was stopping the Course from coming. And I argued and I pleaded and I cried and I said, I don't think I could be any more out of my mind and still form sentences. Because he was in my mind all the time. You know, it was like, I really did. I felt like I was sort of incapacitated already. How am I thinking too much? But I never got an answer. Just, you can't go on with your thinking mind. I started to feel just horrible, like I was dying. I went to the doctor and I found out I was terribly anemic. And I was anemic because I'd forget to eat while I was receiving the course. I mean, I would just be so enthralled. I would forget to eat. That was part of the reason anyway. So how could I be too much in my thinking mind? So this yearning, this longing and desire built and built and built until finally, what followed was the embrace. If you know that chapter, this is the most beautiful chapter of the Course. And it begins, your longing now has reached a fever pitch, a burning in your heart quite different from that which you have felt before. Your heart may even feel as if it is stretching outward, straining heavenward, near to bursting with its desire for union, a desire you do not understand but can surely feel. This is a call to move now into my embrace and let yourself be comforted. Let the tears fall and the weight of your shoulders rest upon mine. Let me cradle your head against my breast as I stroke your hair and assure you that it will be all right. Realize this is the whole world, the universe, the all of all in whose embrace you literally exist. Feel the gentleness and the love. Drink in the safety and the rest. Close your eyes and begin to see with an imagination that is beyond thought and words. You are no longer the object viewing the subjects of the kingdom. You are the heart of the kingdom's beauty revealed. The beloved child suckled at the breast of the Queen Mother Earth, one child of one mother, nameless and beyond naming. No I resides here. You have given up the vision of your eyes and the eye of your ego. And I read that much of it because I wanted to get to that part. That's the first time Jesus talks about we have given up the I of the ego. And he begins this course telling us that's where we're headed. But he still talks about the ego through the first book as something that we still are dealing with. But he does say here, in this one spot, after all that yearning and desire, the I of the ego is gone. And he says this to us in the book. He says yearning and desire, longing and desire is essential. This is one of the problems with the curriculums that we've had, is that they don't bring you to this point of longing and desire, which you have to get to before you can really accept the truth. I left my water somewhere.
I can show up.
Thank you. So this is why I'm talking about yearning and desire. I like to talk about some of the things that I never heard spiritual leaders talk about. We hear about practices and meditation and studying, but I had never heard anyone call me or tell me I would have to reach this peak, this place of deep yearning and desire. And deep yearning and desire is not particularly comfortable. I think that I think we've kind of heard that if we are not peaceful and we're not happy and we have any kind of struggle, that's all coming from the ego. But yearning and desire is not of the ego. And yearning and desire is soulful. And it can be melancholy. And we might not have expected to feel those sorts of things either in our spiritual journey. They're almost like words of the past, you know. It's like the old Christians would talk about dark nights of the soul and melancholy and that kind of thing, but hadn't been very much of that recently, at that time anyway. It's still I don't hear of it. So there is a lot about this, like I said, in Course of Love. And what I've decided that it's all about is making our willingness total. Our total willingness. This is how I felt. It was like at every step that this yearning and desire was called up, it was like I was being made more willing. And I didn't know I could get more willing. I mean, I thought I was totally willing, but every step it was a little more willing. Until I really did feel that my willingness was total. It was like I wanted to be used. It was like, oh my God, if I don't get an answer about this calling, if I don't get to give, I'm going to go out of my mind. So that's kind of what I see Jesus wanting to lead us to. And it might not sound all that great, but it has its benefits, I guess. And to bring it out of the realm of just, what happens in the spiritual, it's like, I'm a writer. And when I give myself totally to a work that I'm writing, I enter that state where I'm gone, but I'm more fully there than ever. And like Rudy probably knows that from music. It's like if you are a musician, if you are an artist, if you are a writer, you experience this. You know what I'm talking about. You give your all. If you don't give your all to what you're writing, you might as well not do it, in a way, to your music. And eventually Jesus would tell me, because I kind of thought he just needed me for my fingers. And he said, no, I need all of you. And I really felt everything. I had to give everything. So including really giving up my job and security and things like that. Gave everything. But this was worth everything. I wouldn't change a thing. And my mom will tease me. She'll say, you should have stayed at that university job. You would have had benefits. That sound like a mom? And with healthcare right now, sometimes, no, I don't think that. So when A Course of Love was done, I said, Jesus, what am I to do now? And I think actually a lot of us do that probably when we're done, especially because Jesus says, put the book away and go live it. I don't think very many of us put the books away right away. I certainly didn't. It's probably been a couple years now since I read it straight through, because I spent a lot of time on it when we did the combined volume a couple years ago. But I have it by my bed, and I read it every night. And usually I'll just open it at random. And if I have a question in my mind, it's always answered. It's just amazing to me. But so when I asked Jesus, what am I to do now? He said, be a companion to those willing to leave the ego behind. Oh no, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Be a companion to those willing to leave hell behind. That's what I said. Hell behind. And it was the hell that threw me off. If he'd said ego, I might have gotten, it was like, what? Oh my gosh, I complained about that for a while. I said, look how Jesus talks to me. He never gives me a straight answer. It's like, you just wish, just once it would just be really crystal clear, And especially, because it's like, okay, the course is done. I thought he'd maybe tell me what he wanted me to do with it, But no, be a companion to those willing to leave hell behind. So it did take me a couple of years before I really felt into that and decided that hell was the ego and the ego's illusions. and that what I was to do was to be a companion to those willing to leave the ego and its illusions behind. And the word companion didn't bother me at all. You know, the Course doesn't talk, I mean, we start out with some teaching and learning, but it doesn't leave us there. It's got the dialogues at the end, and we move into this, I kind of think of it like a web, you know, we're all equals here. And companionship, it's like we're walking together. And I always imagine, you know, the 40 days and nights we go to the mountain. And we do that without leaving home, but Jesus says we do that together. And that it's practice in holding more than one level of awareness in our minds. And I have felt that. It's like we walk together. And if we're climbing a mountain together, we need everybody. We need all the different skills, you know. And so that's kind of the way this feels. It's like you can't have everybody be the same. You need everybody for their gifts and what they have to give. But I didn't have a lot of interest in A Course of Love like I might have thought I would. And I did spend a lot of years with yearning and desire about that. Well, where are the people for this course? And I always had some readership and people writing me the most amazing things. And I felt like I knew everyone who was reading A Course of Love. And it's kind of funny because now, you know, my publisher will tell me about somebody who's, you know, written from someplace and is so excited. And I'm like, well, I don't know that person. He's like, Mari, you're not going to know everybody anymore, you know? But I kind of feel like I ought to know everybody. But the reason I said that I decided, you know, when I remembered what this topic was, that I thought it was a really good one, is because I actually do want to talk about the ego. And I want to talk about the ego like in this last time kind of way, because it's like I feel like I want to start a campaign to get rid of the ego, because there's so many people I know who have been reading the Course of Love for a while and who are wonderful, beautiful people, and who I know have realized that they exist in union and that they are at one with the source of love. And then they'll talk about the ego. And I believe I know why, because I was like that at the beginning too. And what would trip me up every time was some feeling or some thought that I would ascribe to being of the ego. So I'd be going along and I would have great faith in myself and in Jesus and in this work, and then I'd be pissed about something. Or I'd be momentarily back in a place of shame, or whatever it was, it was like, oh, the ego, oh my God, the ego. And then I'd have to undo all that again, so I know how that is. But I mean, I hear people, beautiful people, talk about, sheesh, you know, it's my ego that likes this car, you know. It's like, well, what's the matter with your car? Anyway, it just sort of, it becomes more and more foreign to me to talk about the ego, but I became sort of excited about the idea that maybe I could help. Because I realized eventually that there was a key about when I would have these feelings that I would ascribe to the ego. And invariably, it was when I was encountering an opportunity to be my true self. When I was finding myself in a situation where I almost had to choose. You know, like, to make it kind of simple, like I'm an introvert, okay? And if you're an introvert, you live your whole life kind of by the extroverted way. And I'm a writer, and I lived all this while without really setting boundaries, even when A Course of Love was coming. It was like, sometimes I felt like my daughter's job at Taco Bell was more important. But it wasn't their fault, it was my fault. Because I didn't have the honor and respect for my true self that I needed to have. And so I started realizing, every time I had these thoughts, it wasn't about building up the ego. It was about liberating my true self. And I really want you all, if you still experience this, if you still think, oh, I can't be in union, I've got these ego thoughts. If you're like that, stop a minute when you have those thoughts and see if you aren't feeling a call to be more truly who you are. Because there's an honesty component to this. You know, it's like one example recently, well, about a year ago, and I still struggle. I'm a very deeply feeling person, and I still struggle with my feelings. You know, it's like sometimes my feelings feel out of control. I just feel too much. And I had this woman friend, brilliant, brilliant woman, and she does something like counseling for a living, but she helps people to name their feelings. And she said, Mari, let me work with you. I'll help you to name your feelings. And I was like, you know, this was on the phone, you know, but I was like, but I kind of led her to believe that I was willing to do this. And we even scheduled an appointment at one time. And finally I said, because I'm not like that. I don't like to label my feelings. And it's like, it's not my way. And I knew that. It was like there was something in me saying, no, this isn't your way. Don't do that. It's kind of like we each have our own ways of dealing with things. But I just kind of let my feelings do what they, you know, do. And eventually I am always awaiting revelation. You know, what is this here to reveal? And sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, but that's the way I am, and I didn't want to change that. So I finally told her. But this was a huge thing for me, because I was used to going along. If somebody wanted to help me, I'd be afraid that I would hurt their feelings if I didn't say yes. I would be afraid, I would have this feeling like if, you know, it'd be horrible to say no to babysitting my grandson. You know, it was just, I was an enabler, you know, maybe years and years and years being an enabler. So I had all this catching up to do to become my true self and to honor my gifts. And this is really what Jesus is calling us to. He's saying, you have to love yourself first. If you love yourself, you will love everyone. And it's so true. It is so true. And it's so simple. And yet it's so hard. So he's telling us over and over to accept ourselves. And there's this wonderful, wonderful line I'll read you from the dialogues where he talks of radical acceptance. And the only reason that we can get to radical acceptance is because we've left the ego behind. If we haven't left the ego behind, Jesus would be making us into egomaniacs about now, with this radical acceptance. We have to have done that step. And we have to have accepted that inside ourselves, that I have moved past that. I can be my true self now. So I'm going to find that. This is from the amazing trilogy of days 8, 9, and 10. How many have been through the dialogues? Oh, not as many. I'm sorry if I'm talking about things that you aren't real familiar with, but now you can anticipate them. But there's this, I mean, it's just like this whammy, I think, in day 8, 9, and 10. It's like, oh my God, what hit me? These are just the most marvelous chapters. So, days, they're the most marvelous days. So in day 8, accept the present, we hear, all power to effect change comes from acceptance. Not acceptance of the way things are, but acceptance of who you are in the present. Not through acceptance of the way you want to be, but of the way you are now. There will be many things within your life that will take some time to change, but many others that can change instantly through this radical acceptance. And you know, what we've been used to is accepting what's out there. That seemed to be the message of A Course in Miracles, or the way it was interpreted anyway. But I know that I never belonged to A Course in Miracles group. I just read it and read it and read it. And then after A Course of Love, those were the first groups that invited me, actually, were Course in Miracles groups. Because, you know, who would find A Course of Love but Course in Miracles people? It was, and I can still remember these discussions that we had then about acceptance. And in one of the groups, there was like one person who took over the group every time they met. And they all talked about this. But they were practicing forgiveness or something and just letting him do, you know, what he did. It's like, this didn't make any sense to me. And so there was this whole, to me, like this not being true thing. And even if I might not have been to this point of, you know, really knowing my course, you know, the thing is, I knew this course as it came. I knew this course like it was in my bones. And I believe I still know this course that way. But bringing it back out has been difficult for me. It's like it didn't stick intellectually. And so I still have people ask me questions that I can't answer because I don't have that intellectual understanding about some things, and yet I know it. You know, I know it. And I like what Tony said about that as he introduced me. That this isn't about the intellectual knowing. It's not about a right answer. And I love that about A Course of Love. It's like Jesus describes things in different ways. Like he might tell you 16 ways of what Christ consciousness is. And I figure we get to choose the one we like the best, you know, because but I mean, there are no right answers. There is your heart's answer. And he says this over and over to us too. That your heart has your answer. And nobody else can give you your answer. Just a couple more things left, and then I can answer questions. Early in the Course, there's this quote that says, "Herein lies your peace and your perfection. You would not be other than who you are." Everybody remember that one?
Yes.
And to me, now, when I hear you would not be other than who you are, I mean, I really believe people come to that. You know, it's like you might have thought you wanted to be somebody other than who you are, but no, you really want to be who you are. You just want to be who you are truly. You really want to be who you are. And you don't want to be other than who you are. You don't want to be the ego. And we are free to this. We just have to let ourselves let go of these habits and these patterns. And I really encourage you to do so. Because everything new in this Course comes after the ego is gone. Everything really new and really brilliant, and that really talks about the new and who we are to be, and we are to be creators of the new. And Jesus says somewhere in here that if you just read this Course, you may change the world. But if you really take it in, if you let it affect you, you let it return you to who you are, then you will create a new world. And this is what we're to be together. We are to be creators of the new. I mean, I can't think of anything more exciting than that. And I have met the people that I know can make this happen. We are on our way to really what is a new life form. I mean, Jesus calls this new. He calls it the elevated self of form, which is a clunky phrase that I do not like. But I think we have to have it so that we don't forget the form. So that we can live true to who we are while we are in form. And only in that way, when you really can get your arms wrapped around that, you know only in that way are we going to change the world. Create a new world where heaven and earth are joined. So I'm going to close with a prayer for you. Seems about right. It's hot, and we can do questions and answers then if you'd like. This is from the first day of the dialogues. You may join me, or you may close your eyes. It's sort of like going to be a cross between a prayer and a meditation. Before the prayer begins, Jesus says, "Open your heart, for the one who dwells there in union with all will emerge from this opening." This is from the beautifully titled chapter, "Acceptance of the State of Grace of the Newly Identified Child of God." I am no longer the personal self who was separate and alone. I am my Christ self. I dwell in unity. My identity is certain. This is the truth. I am not less than what I once was, but more. Where once I was empty, I now am full. Where once I dwelt in darkness, I now dwell in the light. Where once I had forgotten, now I remember who I am. Now I go forth to live as who I am within the world, to make cause and effect as one, and union with the source of love and all creation, the reality. When you hear, "Now I go out to live as who I am within the world," what do you see? What is the vision of your heart? When given the freedom to imagine, what do you view as you? Being who you are in the world. Howard Thurman once said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and then go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive." What would coming alive, fully alive, look like to you? In day 2, we hear that it's time for the final merging of the self of unity and the self of form. Would this view of yourself look much different than a self fully alive? So I want to encourage you to feel into those questions. Maybe journal about them if you journal. Maybe talk to each other. Because this is about you. This is about you being who you are in the fullest way that you want to be, that you desire to be in this world. And I also want to say, remember that the occasional thoughts you might think are of the ego are liberating your true self. Thank you.